It's really our pleasure and honor to be back on this stage, collaborating with you and with New College in this way. It's always a joy to work with you and Ron and the whole team here. So we're so happy to be back and happy to see all of you in the audience and on the live stream as well. We've put together a program that is basically showing one solo piece for both of our instruments, and then it will close out with a duo piece for violin and vibraphone. The first piece on the program is a work for solo violin and electronic track. It's called Honest Music by Nico Muley, and it was written in 2002. Nico has an amazing CD that this is on, and I encourage you to listen to it if you enjoy what you hear. It's really an incredible a piece that came about sort of, as he says, from the cutting room floor. What you will hear are sort of building blocks of various motifs and fragments of lyric sounds and double stops from the violin, which have been amalgamated in a track that plays as I play, and I will signal to Ron, who will start the track while I start a timer on my phone. So in case you're wondering why I have my phone on the stage, it's not so that I can stay up to date with my emails. So what you'll hear is actually violin on the track, as well as harp, synthesizer. There are some other electronic sounds, static and crackling. And basically Nico wanted to sort of highlight the beauty of things both coming together, but then falling apart again. It's a really beautiful piece, and it's been really fun to put together. I don't often get to play works with electronics. I feel like George usually has that honor, so it's fun for me to have something backing me up as I stand here on the solo stage. So this is Nico Muley's Honest Music.
beautiful, Sam. And it's great. It's so nice. We've been very lucky over the years to develop a relationship with some of these composers. 2 of the 3 we're performing tonight. And Nico's a good friend over the years from Tanglewood. And this piece so reminds me of Nico because he has like the quickest wit of anything you've ever seen. Nico's always talking about like 500 things at once in like this coded way, and his mind is just moving miles ahead of you. And it's amazing how he weaves it in the cutting room floor. And it was beautiful. I like your playing a lot. Yeah, it's really nice. This next work is going to be different. When given the opportunity, I like to remind people that I'm a drummer. I think, I get a bad rap for like playing the vibraphone and marimba and triangle and crash cymbals, and people are like, okay, yeah, but like, I like drummers. I'm like, yeah, don't worry, I could do that too. This next work is called Mobile for multiple percussion, and this is a work by an incredible drummer, instrumentalist, composer by the name of Glenn Cochi. And Glenn Cochi is the drummer for a band, Chicago-based band called Wilco, that some of you may be familiar with. That's right, Wilco fans in the house. And this work is rather based on one of Glenn's general improvisations and kind of the way he thinks about drums and their existence and their life form and how it exists with other things and electric sounds. So Glenn has composed this electronic track, and he has also composed this work that comprises a very modified drum set. There are various things that happen. Also play a glockenspiel, play these tuned metal discs, which are called crotals, and then it kind of turns into a raucous drum solo, which is a lot of fun for me, and I hope you enjoy. Thanks so much. One of the things that I think Samantha and I both love most about new music and old music that was once new, but we would have been able to notice it more if we were living in those times, is the incredible breadth and depth of what is new music. We encounter so much music every day from friends and composers and colleagues, and people are like, hey, hear this piece, hey, listen to this piece. It's so amazing, and and then we'll talk to some people who maybe aren't in the music scene or experiencing it the way we do, and they go like, oh, new music, I don't like that. It's like, wait a second. What new music do you not like? Because there's just so much. I mean, we've gone through 2 pieces so far that were written, in the past handful of years, and we're about to play a third, which is wildly different from the 2 that came before it. And the thing that I think we love about that is that we can exist in so many musical universes simultaneously that it's great. I mean, we're not limited by repertoire. I'm not limited by instruments. I feel bad for Sam, but I couldn't do it. I don't know how they do it. They just play the same instrument all the time. But I mean, there's just such a world out there. Yeah, but it's not my fault you chose the harder, wrong one. No, I mean, it's such an incredible panoply of things that are existing, especially right now, simultaneously. So many genres, post-genre, this has no genre, Nico's piece has no genre, the vibe and violin piece now that we're about to play by a good friend of mine and former teacher of mine, Joseph Pereira. Joe Pereira, Joe P, as we call him, is the current principal timpanist of the Los Angeles Philharmonic. Before that, he was the assistant timpanist at the New York Philharmonic, and he taught at the Juilliard School when I was there. And Joe is also an incredible composer. And he composes this music of incredible nuance and depth and panache and subtlety. He uses a lot of extended techniques, a lot of harmonics for Sam, a lot of harmonics on the vibraphone. It's also interesting to have Joe write for a percussion instrument because he's really good at them and he knows what they can do, which makes it really hard to play them. Joe's one of those guys that's like, oh, you just do this on it and it's fine. You're like, it's not really that easy. It's not how that works. So it's great to be able to get into his mind as a composer, a real composer performer, which is always fun for me as a percussionist to bring that his sound world to the vibraphone and also how it interacts with the violin. The interplay and the sound colors between the two are really, really fascinating, and we hope you enjoy Joe Pereira's duo for vibraphone and violin.
So we're now going to have a conversation about music and creative practice and the daily work of musicians. This is a conversation that we're going to start here, and we can continue in the reception after we get to talk a little bit. But first of all, actually, I just would like to give our performers another round of applause for that beautiful program. And there's so many different things that we might talk about. It's great to know a bit about the pieces, and I'm wondering if we could just start by talking a little bit about. Let's take a piece like what you just performed, the duet. When a new piece, when you know that you're going to perform a new piece, and you get out the music stand and put the score on the stand and start to internalize it, work on it, develop it. What is your process like? What is some of that work like for you? And this can be really anything from metronomes or singing or but what is like getting to know a new piece? What is that process like when you first get it on the stand?
Sure. So this piece, actually, I feel like we can speak to two parts of that, because when we first learned it, it was a couple years ago, and so the process then for revisiting it for another concert was actually looked very different. For example, we actually read it with George playing piano and violin, and actually that gave such a different idea of how you can hear the harmonic structure that he does have at the root of all of this, and it's very interesting. But I think a piece like this, at least when I first look at it, I don't know if you could see my music, but for a duo like this, it's very helpful he has both lines there. So I have a score part in essence, so I can see what's happening. And so, initially, visually, I'll just take note of kind of what lines up, where in the structure of how it looks on the page. You have these different larger groups of where the phrasing might go, or especially with this piece, which is in 3 movements, but even within the 3 movements, there are fairly obvious sections where there are pauses in between. For me, learning my notes, definitely, I always am a metronome practicer. I like to build things up with the metronome, slow to fast, which if you're not a musician, it probably seems like a strange thing, and maybe even if you are, but I just find it such a great way to get internalized muscle memory and dexterity, especially of like the first movement of this piece, for example. And then once I have that, I feel like I have a basis for putting things kind of on top of that layer. In terms of rehearsing together, I think we just took things section by section and kind of tried to put things together after we'd gotten a feel of kind of the whole sort of, I can't remember now, but I feel like we probably read it through just to get an idea of the scope of it without it being anything approximating correct. Because sometimes, as one of my teachers liked to say, it was you you refine, you buff out the scratches from the car, like after you've seen it. It's basically like the opposite of like starting from the smallest details, like get the big picture and then fill in all the details later, which is also helpful. So I don't know if you want to.
For me, it often ends up being, I have to like get into the world of whatever the composer, especially with a work like this, has created. You know, at first reading, it doesn't make a lot of sense. You know, it's hard to find the structure. So I try to work in multiple layers. It also depends on how much time we have.
Oh, yes.
Sometimes if it's like, hey, you know, there's this thing, you got to play this piece next week. That's a different plan than, you know, if you have plenty of time to dig in. So for me, it's looking simultaneous at the macro level and the micro level. So trying to see the structure of the piece, get into it as much as possible. For me, often it's a lot of learning roadmaps and learning what different notations mean that composers have come up with, and there will be a legend or a key or something. And if it's a very difficult one, like for the drum set solo, where it's just written out on notation paper and you need to know like what drum is what exactly when it comes up, I will sometimes come up with little exercises for that new notation to play. So I'll just write out random things and then force myself to play it as if I were learning a new instrument, and to internalize like, okay, so the second line is tom-tom and the bottom, you know, the bottom space is this weird crash cymbal thing. And so trying to get yourself inside of the composer's intent and idea. And then really practically speaking, for the first time I'm looking at it, I will flip through the whole thing, see what's no problem, okay, no big deal, and then where all the black notes are, where all the thorniest stuff is, what's going to be the most difficult and possibly challenging virtuosically and technique-wise, what I look at and go like, I'm maybe haven't done that before, I need to start working on that, and really take that section and dig in so that I know, okay, I don't have to worry about the easy stuff in the beginning. When it gets really nasty, I need to start in on that now, prioritizing that hierarchy.
I do the opposite of that. I always practice the easy stuff, and then at the end of the week, I'm in full panic because I haven't learned any of the hardest parts yet.
I didn't know that about you.
Really?
So
I should learn from this, but I don't. I'm not going to. Next time I have to learn a piece, I'm going to learn the hard part last.
So you find the time pressure useful when you know that there's a challenging element to the piece and it just has to come together.
Oh.
Sam
No,
thrives.
I think it's really interesting because we
Yes.
have these ideas that musicians all approach these things sort of the same way, right? But there are a lot of different ways. No, really.
Samantha and I could
because,
not prepare
yeah.
more opposite.
Yeah.
I do not understand how Samantha prepares music. She does not understand how I prepare music.
No.
We come at it from polar opposites every day in the house.
Yeah, usually.
And I will be like, wow, what are you doing? She'll be like, don't worry about it. I got this. It's going to be fine.
It always comes together.
And yeah, Sam definitely thrives on the heat of the chase.
I do. I will never be. I've fought it many years now. I will never be the kind of person that makes sense to give me something a year in advance, because I'm not going to do it till slightly before the time that is due. And for some reason, that's just, I don't know why. I wish, and I've gotten so much better at managing that. So like, I'm not actually always in trouble for these things. But
not always.
But no, what is helpful though to know that, okay, that's actually how I work, and I structure my time that way, and I know now that especially with new music, and I know I'm so much more acquainted with how I work. That seems silly to say, but just like really, really understanding now at this point in my career, in my life, I know how long it's going to take me to do certain things, to get certain things on my finger. I know when I don't need to worry about it, and I know when something literally is just going to take time on the fingerboard to settle in. And so I do know, what's going to happen in terms of how to structure things. But I also feel like an interesting thing I used to talk about with a former Sarasota orchestra colleague was that often it's about improving the general level of playing so that you're for me, and I found this more and more, I'm really working on, often I don't practice the pieces that I'm working on. I'm just practicing like technique and basic violin playing, because for me, like that's what I need to improve constantly to get the base level, the floor of my playing higher and higher, because then I'm not challenged by, oh, I'm practicing this specific thing to learn how to do this specific thing. Then I know that if I have some passage that is going to come up later, I have the skill to deal with that. And this has been exhibited for me, like when I first read through pieces, it's gotten more and more to the point where like now I can almost read anything off the page. And the things that I can't read off the page, I know that's going to be a huge problem at this point, because that means I've really got to learn something new that goes above and beyond. And 5 years ago, you know, the threshold of things I could read off the page was much, much, much lower. And so at this point, I know, you know, if something doesn't work right away, it's gonna take some work.
And so that's something that comes from working with a lot of new music, right? Because, and you know, one of the things that I think is so interesting about the process of putting together new pieces is that, you know, you don't, kind of like what George was saying, it takes some time to get the piece in your ear, right? So there's the outcome of your work takes some initial imagination and a kind of an oral imagination. But this is so great, but all of the things that you're saying, and by the way, I'm hoping that my students who are in the music and your creative practice class are all taking notes, because this is really great and interesting stuff. I wanted to come back to something that you said about developing an awareness not just of your part, but of the kind of ensemble elements, the way that the parts can kind of move together. Can you talk a little bit more about what your process is for that? And it's so interesting that you practice this with the piano part. That must have been pretty interesting and different. Is that something that you normally do when you're working on percussion music?
Yeah, so I mean, I think my role as a percussionist, and the thing that over the years, looking back on my career at this point, it's getting old, I guess. But, you know, no longer being a student, and 10th year of, you know, doing this professionally, both orchestrally and chamber music, I think what sets percussionists in particular, violinists are always the stars, especially in the orchestra. You know, everybody's gonna, you know, be like, you gotta be with the violins, you have to be inside their sound, that is the melody, they are driving the bus. And our job as percussionists, and what makes a great percussionist usually, is someone who can color that, be inside that sound, in that atmosphere, and be incredibly complementary to that situation. So you kind of have to be like a global citizen, like musically, as a percussionist. So what I will do, and my conducting work, I mean, that's what draws me so much to conducting and studying the full score, or whether it's a duo, or a sextet, or an entire orchestral piece, an entire orchestral work. Being able to play at the piano kind of large chunks of the score, to play from the score, to be off the page, but actually be listening to the entire musical ecosystem, and have your technique at a point where you don't have to think about that. You don't have to think about like whatever lick you're playing or whatever you're playing. Like most of the time we're playing this duo, I'm looking at Sam's part in the score. I am not looking at the vibraphone part, by and large. So, and that's why, I mean, I feel comfortable saying like we play pretty well together. And I mean, like the points are on, and we put stuff where it belongs, because I am following, for the most part, my eyes are on Sam's line. And if she moves a little, and if she waits a little, hesitates somewhere, I'm gonna be right there with her. We don't have to go back. Also, doing it for like 11 years, 12 years at this point, a lot helps. But also, we don't really talk about that stuff in rehearsal. We don't have to. We don't have to be like, oh, you know, you're gonna have to wait here, you're gonna have to wait here. There's not much written in our music. It's very much like, go, you play, I will be with you. Promise. And like that comes from just being comfortable, and that comes from,
And
that's in the orchestra too.
Both of us having just like constantly reinforcing like basic techniques. And I find this with other people who we collaborate with, who we want to collaborate with time and time and time and time again, because you don't have to talk about putting it together. You can talk about how to make it music. And so like and he as a percussionist has helped me immensely, because my ear is now tuned just as much, I think, to the rhythmic structure of things as the harmonic structure. And growing up as a violinist, it was so much about intonation and the notes on the page, and I feel like that is too bad often, that those violinists and those string players that end up playing new music don't have the same focus on rhythm and feel and rhythmic groove and being on the front side of a beat or the back side of a beat or squarely in the middle until later. And I think that's something that has really helped me, certainly.
Yeah, and I think, existing both in the orchestral world, the world of old music, and, being new music interpreters simultaneously, those worlds feed off of each other in such an incredible way. If we're playing Mahler on stage, I will know in my part through score study and through just an awareness of being on the stage, this note has to be with the trombones. This note has to come at the end of this phrase for the violins, and they're going to pull back. You have to put it there. So I'm not looking at the music. You're looking at a mix of the conductor and the front of the violins, or the trombone's breath and their slide. And bringing our awareness of chamber music, of the micro level, to a macro structure like that, that's what I think sets apart like great orchestral traditions from, just like, well, you just watch the conductor. It's like, not really. It's not really how it works at all. So letting those feed off of each other and studying the macro, existing in the macro, working on the micro by yourself, and having that all in there, and then not thinking about it in the performance.
Yeah.
Letting it go. Yeah.
Amazing. So yeah, just to pull out a couple of things, so much I think of what musicians do can translate so beautifully into not just musical projects, but things that you can kind of take with you into your work. So thinking about sort of approaches to particularly challenging aspects of what it is that you're doing, right? Grabbing that tricky passage and isolating it. Thinking about sort of raising your overall level of technique so that when you go to confront something new, you're feeling like you're in the shape that you're sort of approaching it from a standpoint of feeling really comfortable with what you're doing. And just like thinking about awareness of like all the different elements, not just of what you're doing, but of what the people who you're collaborating with are doing. I think that's such a beautiful aspect of chamber music. And yeah, you're describing it really, really wonderfully. We have time for one or two questions, and then we're going to sort of disperse into the lobby for a reception. But so yeah, maybe, and I'll repeat your question into the mic, by the way, for the live stream audience. So yeah, I see there in the middle. Yes.
Specific to polyrhythms?
Yeah, so the question is about, what approaches to rhythm, polyrhythms, and kind of putting all of that together.
Yeah, so I spent a lot of time on that, working on that over the years. And something as a percussionist and a drummer, it's kind of a big part of our sound world, more than spinning like the longest musical phrase. We're not really taught that as much in school as I think we should be. So that's a different topic. But being comfortable with yourself, with like playing 2 against 3, how that interacts, being able to have 3 going on your foot, and then 2 on top, or 4 against 3, and being able to just do little exercises with yourself where you're comfortable with the existence of polyrhythms, doing at least 2 at a time, and then doing sometimes 3 at a time. So adding a 3rd layer with a different limb. You can have up to 4
using
going
the
on.
metronome
while doing it against the metronome. And then being comfortable enough with that in your own part to then be able to hear and sing. Sometimes I'll sing her part when I'm just practicing by myself to know where my notes fit in against a different polyrhythm. So you being able to, have the repetition of playing one line enough so that it's just kind of rote. It's in your hands. It's automatic. You're going to be able to play that. Then sing the other line on top of it. Try to build that in. And then when somebody else is playing it, you will know it intimately enough to follow through with it. And as you practice it and get better at it, it comes more naturally.
I feel like also whatever the end result of where either if it's a short, one bar situation or longer, like having the same end goal in mind and identifying that so that we're both aiming for that point really helps just guide how we play something. And there are different ways of playing those polyrhythms within each other, like sitting, pulling back and making sure it feels heavy, or slightly driving to a certain point. And so like if we're struggling with something, then it's usually because we don't have the same concept about where we're arriving or where we're getting to.
Yeah, I would also say the most important thing is just working on your internal pulse and making sure that, turning on the metronome, playing with the metronome, but then just as much reducing the metronome. So I will start something where I have the metronome on like all the 16th notes, if it's a predominantly 16th note passage, or triplets or whatever, and play all with it, and then reduce it to eighth notes, reduce it to quarter notes, reduce it to half notes, reduce it to whole notes. So then I'm playing, and
it's like that horrible pacer that you had to run to in school, if you ever did that, where it clicks and you have to run between 2 points. Yes.
Well, yeah, and so then you're getting to the point where you're working on making sure your own pulse is good enough in your ear that so then sometimes I'm practicing with the metronome once every 4 measures, 6 measures. So where I'm playing a whole phrase and then the metronome is there, and I know if I came out a little before or a little after, okay, so I'm rushing slightly there, so I need to make sure I hold that, and continually judging your own pulse against that. You do that work, then you'll find that, and find other people who have great internal pulse, and things get easier.
George is very good at this, because sometimes I'll hear him doing this and he'll speed up and slow down wildly within a phrase, but then somehow he's kept track of the time, like intrinsically, to end up where it has.
I mean, rubato, the idea of the push and pull and the stretch in time and what makes a musical phrase so beautiful, like when you're playing Bach, whatever Bach it may be, that it is this idea of how it flows and goes against time. Whenever you take rubato, you have to give it back, and it has to equal out to, because our entire audience who's listening is sitting there going like, nodding their head, and if you deviate too far from that, you're going to lose them. So I mean, being able to weave a path, this beautiful sinewy path around that, and come right back to everyone's pulse is what makes, when people listen to Yo-Yo or listen to James Ennis or somebody, and they're like, that was great. And you say, like, why was that great? And everybody goes like, I don't know. That is, if you really analyze it, it's usually that's why, because they're able to spin this phrase around your perception of time in this way that's really affirming and grounding.
Yeah. Never disquieting, never
uncomfortable. Never like, it just, it wasn't quite, and it's thought out. It's really worked on. Yeah. For some, others just do it. Yeah. For me, I have to work on it.
So this is really, really great. I think actually we're out of time for this part of the evening. I do want you all to enjoy the reception out in the lobby, and we can continue the conversation there. Thank you all so much for coming. One more round of applause for our guests.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Ron. Thanks for having us.